This is Michael Lukes from the Collegiate Entrepreneurs Organization, here with young entrepreneur and fashion designer Zoe Damacela of Zoe Damacela Apparel. Zoe, thanks a lot for joining me.
Oh, thank you.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and your entrepreneurial journey.
Sure, yeah. I think that I have kind of a typical entrepreneurial story. I started my very first business when I was about 7, which I think a lot of serial entrepreneurs do. I actually started my business, though, because my family was very poor growing up. My mom was a single mother, and she had me when she was pretty young, and so we always kind of struggled with finances, and we were even homeless. And so I think that sort of acted as my inspiration for starting my first business. And then after that, I continued to start businesses all through elementary school. And by the time I was in middle school, I sort of developed an interest in fashion, and I started to learn some of the technical skills that I needed. And that's when I started Zoe Damacela Apparel.
Great. So when you first started getting interested in the fashion world, how did you get started with the company? What were maybe a couple of the steps you took to start your company?
Yeah. Well, when I first started my fashion business, I was 14, and even though I had very sort of kids kind of pocket money that I was making, and so when I first started my apparel business, the most obvious thing I did was I took a lot of fashion classes, and so I learned everything I could possibly learn. And fashion design and illustration and sewing and draping and flat patterning, all that kind of stuff. And then I also enrolled in entrepreneurship classes later. So I kind of made sure that I had the education that I needed in order for my business to be successful, and I sort of took it into my own hands to enroll my classes both in school and even online when I was 14. And the first thing that I did was before I even started selling dresses, I was making all of my own clothes. So I sort of like hyped up my business before it started by making my own clothes and wearing it to school and wearing it around town and things like that. So that once I did start my business, people who went to my school or sort of familiar with the aesthetic and they'd seen the product already. So I think that was probably one of the main reasons why it was so successful right off the bat, was that I took a lot of time to make sure that I had the skills that I needed before I got started, and also I promoted myself and I sort of I built up the hype for my business so that once it did start, I had a long list of customers on the very first day.
So what do you feel has been the key or several keys to your success and growth as an entrepreneur?
I think the first key is probably just my background. I think that kids who come from poverty, kids who come from low-income communities, we sort of have this street sense that I think is really unique to us. Like, we really have to learn to manage money when we're really young. We understand the value of the dollar when we're really young. We are used to budgeting. We're used to sort of having to decide what's in a and what's something that you just want. And so kids who sort of come from my background sort of naturally have this ability to be really good with finances. And then the other key, I think, is the fact that I really took my education into my own hands. I lived in a really bad neighborhood. I went to a bad public school. And so rather than just accepting sort of my fate, I actively went online. I looked at free classes that I could find in the city. I even watched YouTube videos and learned how to sew through there. I really did everything that I could to educate myself because I knew that was really the key to being successful in business and ultimately being successful overall.
Great. A lot of young entrepreneurs leave school to pursue growing their own company. You're currently attending Northwestern University. How do you balance the opportunity cost of going to school versus being able to focus solely on your business?
Oh my gosh, I think that's something that I think about a lot, and I think that I've always really prioritized my education. I think the fact that I didn't have a college fund or anything like that. I was never really, I didn't have everything set up for me. I really had to work hard to get where I am and work hard to get into Northwestern. And so that is something that's just a personal goal of mine. But I also think that because I didn't really have a lot of resources to work with, I always understood that my education was really my best shot at being successful as an entrepreneur. And also I've been used to sort of multitasking my entire life. Like I said, my first business was when I was 8 or 7, and since then I've always run a business and gone to school, and so I think that understanding that my education was really important and understanding the role that my education played in my current success, that's sort of what keeps me focused on my schoolwork. And it really has paid off. I mean, I really don't think that I would be where I am now had I chosen not to go to school and to focus entirely on my business instead. I really did need sort of fundamental skills and technical skills, even just problem-solving skills that I learned through my schoolwork.
Now, you'll be speaking at the upcoming 2013 CEO National Conference in Chicago to a lot of other young entrepreneurs who are in school. What are some ways you can balance going to school while working on your company?
I think the biggest thing is to really make sure that you have a set schedule and that you follow that set schedule. Something that I do is every single Sunday night, I sit down and I look at my schedule for the week, and I sort of allocate my time to whatever it is that's most important that week. And I probably spend like a good 30 minutes to an hour just really narrowing down my schedule and making sure to give myself some free time and give myself time with friends and family, give myself time to work on the design side of the business and the management side of the business, and also time for my schoolwork, of course. And so it's not just making a schedule, but making sure that you constantly stick to your schedule. I print out my schedule and I have it with me all the time. I have it on my phone. And so that, I think, is the most important thing, because it can be really easy when you don't have a schedule to kind of put things off, and then they never end up getting done.
Now, what will you be speaking about at the 2013 CEO National Conference?
I'm going to be sort of speaking about a lot of things. Most importantly, I think it's following your dreams, not letting anything hold you back, and balancing school and work life. Because I think it can be hard for young entrepreneurs. It's like we really want to make sure that we get everything that we can out of our college experience and enjoy this time in our lives, but at the same time we have this drive to create something, and we put a lot of time and energy into it, and so that can be sort of hard to find that balance. And so that's really the bulk of what I'm going to be talking about at the conference.
What's your best piece of advice for young, aspiring, or current entrepreneurs?
I think I really have a lot of advice for young entrepreneurs. I think one of the pieces of advice that I think is kind of unusual is that it's okay to fail and it's okay to quit. I think I didn't really ever hear that when I was growing up, that it's okay to quit something when it's not really working out. And that was a lesson that I sort of had to learn the hard way. And so a lot of entrepreneurs, when they first get started, their very first business is not a success. And if you are constantly trying to make something work when you know really deep down that it's not a good idea, or that something needs to be tweaked, and you kind of keep forcing it, you're spending all that time trying to work something out when you could be moving on to your next venture. And so for me, my very first business, I started off selling greeting cards. That didn't work out, so I quit. And then I started selling hair accessories. That didn't work out. I quit that too. And then I started selling candy and snacks. That didn't work out. I quit that. And I kept on quitting all these different businesses. And it's not that you're a quitter and that you don't have good work ethic. It's understanding that time could be better spent doing something else and constantly reinventing yourself and thinking about your goals. And all those quits that I did ultimately led to my success in my fashion business. And if I stayed doing greeting cards, trying to force that greeting card business to work out, I'd be competing with Hallmark, and I don't think that'd work out very well for me.
That's something I've also struggled with, being entrepreneurially minded. Now, a follow-up question to that is, how can you know when something's right to quit, and how have you known that fashion design is the one thing that you really wanted to keep with, even when time gets hard and maybe you want to quit? How can you know that something is worth pursuing, and how can you know something is worth quitting?
I think it's kind of like it's an instinct that you kind of develop over time. And so, of course, when you're starting any business, the first couple of years usually is going to be a little bit rocky, and you probably won't be making a profit. But if you see that there's customer interest, that things are steadily moving upward, that you're able to sort of run your business effectively, that if you see that there's a lot of potential, if you see that you're filling some white space that isn't already filled, if you see that it's a good idea and you're getting positive feedback from it, that's really when you know that you're doing something that's going to pay off in the long run. Versus, let's take the example of my third grade business of greeting cards. I really wasn't filling any white space. There's already a ton of greeting cards on the market. There was really nothing that made my greeting cards any different than anyone else, except for the fact that they were made by an elementary school kid. And so in the long run, that really wasn't going to be a successful business. Although I did recognize that launching that first business, even though it wasn't an innovative idea or it wasn't successful in the long run, those skills that I learned was what was successful. And so the fact that I quit, it wasn't that I scrapped all of that time and it was a waste. Not at all. It was that particular business didn't work out, but the skills that I learned from running that business are what allowed me to eventually run a more successful company. So that I think is sort of the key to knowing when to quit and when not to. And then as far as fashion, it's exactly that. Like for me, I tried all these different things and none of them really worked out as well as fashion. And, I always say that even though I'm a fashion designer, my real passion is entrepreneurship, and fashion sort of just happens to be what I'm good at. My passion in life, something that I'm always interested in, is business and entrepreneurship, and it just so happened that fashion was something that I happened to just have a talent for. I wouldn't necessarily say that I loved fashion and therefore I started a fashion business. It was that I loved business and I found out that fashion was something that I could do. And so I think that that's really what keeps me in the fashion industry. But I'm not necessarily certain that I'll always stay working in fashion. Like I said, my passion is entrepreneurship. It is business, and so I'm sure that I'll venture out into other things in the future for sure.
Great. We'll finish up here with just a few fun fact questions. As a young entrepreneur, you've already had some amazing experiences. What has been your favorite experience so far?
Oh my gosh, there's a ton. I mean, I think my favorite experience was probably meeting President Obama in the Oval Office. I met President Obama for the first time when I was 17, and I was a junior in high school, and I was starting this fashion business, and it was going really well, and I'd gotten a lot of media attention from it. And so when I got the calls telling me that I was going to meet with President Obama, I was really shocked. I had no idea why, but upon meeting him, I realized that he was just like so laid back. He was really, really charismatic. He was asking me questions about what I thought about entrepreneurship and unemployment and job creation and things like that, and I really had a lot to say about those types of things. And so after meeting him, I continued to work with him over the years in the Startup America partnership. But I think I'll always remember that as a defining moment for me, because that was when I started to realize that even though I was running a fashion business and that I was a fashion designer, that business could really have a big impact on other things. And so after I started my fashion business, I started to work more in politics. I started to become a social advocate for education reform, for job creation, for women's and refugee rights. And it really sparked a passion in other areas for me, because I realized that starting up this business, it's not just about making pretty clothes. It's about having sort of a global impact.
What's your favorite thing to do outside of working on your business?
I love doing a lot of different things. One of my passions has always been art. So even though I don't think I'm very good at it, I really love sketching and painting and things like that. Like I said, the thing that sort of came naturally to me was fashion design, but I do love sort of fine arts. So I love doing all that type of stuff. I love going to museums. That's probably like my second biggest passion. If I had been a little bit better of an artist, I probably would have gone down that track instead.
So I'll say, outside of President Obama, what has been your favorite celebrity encounter so far?
Well, I know that probably besides President Obama, or maybe in addition to President Obama, the most helpful celebrity encounter has definitely been Tyra Banks. She first contacted me when I was in high school, and I met with her and sort of told her about my business and everything like that, and she ended up sort of becoming my mentor. And so over the years, she's introduced me to fashion designers. She's taken me to fashion shows. She's modeled my clothes. She's put me on the cover of her magazine. She's really sort of given me a leg up in the industry, and she's written me letters of recommendation. I mean, it's like whenever I have a question about something or I need help with something, she's always there, and she's always rooting for me and really giving me helpful advice and things like that. And so having that support from her has been really, really incredible, and it's also sort of made me appreciate the impact that mentors have had on my life, which is why I make such a conscious effort to do the same thing to other people who need help. So because I got that boost up and that help and that support from her, that's why I have so many people that I mentor. That's why I'm always more than happy to help someone who has a question or who needs a mentor, someone who's either interested in fashion or in business or in anything really. She's really been an amazing impact on my life.
What is one thing in your career that you want to accomplish but you haven't yet?
I think that one thing that I want to accomplish is creating sort of a more global approach to running this fashion business. So far, my business has been concentrated in the U.S. I manufacture all of my clothing in the United States, and I do shows in the U.S., and most of my customers are in the United States. But what I'd really like to do is use the business to help people, especially in the indigenous communities, sort of achieve financial independence. And so what I'd like to do is start to train people in third world countries, especially impoverished women or disadvantaged women, to sort of become entrepreneurs themselves and maybe source fabric from them or beadwork or something like that, and give them the training and the skills that they need to create their own businesses. And so that's something that I'm sort of still working out the kinks on, but that's really like my long-term goal. That's ultimately what I'd like to do.
Great. And then just the last question here. If you could have one entrepreneur in the world join your business, who would it be and why?
I think the person who I'd love to join my business is actually Steve Mariotti, who founded the Network for Teaching Entrepreneurship. He has been an incredible role model and impact since I was a teenager. He's a really, really dynamic personality. He has a lot of really great ideas. And I think the thing that makes him really unique is the fact that he's able to sort of combine a profitable business idea with a more social kind of mission. And the whole idea of having a double bottom line, I think, has always really appealed to me, probably because of my background. And so I think that he would be a really great person to sort of help me navigate how to build that type of a business.
And once again, this has been Michael Lukes with Zoe Damacela. Zoe, thanks again. We look forward to hearing you speak at the 2013 CEO National Conference.
Thank you. Thank you so much.